Felix Faraday paced back and forth in his cluttered lab, muttering to himself as he fiddled with a tangle of wires. His latest invention, a robotic lawnmower that could simultaneously fold laundry, had gone spectacularly wrong. The robot now sat in the corner, twitching and emitting high-pitched beeps, as if it were plotting world domination. Felix's hand hovered over a large, dusty artillery piece that had been gathering cobwebs in the corner of the room for years. He called it the Wrecking Ball, a hand-me-down from Earth's military past, and a symbol of his obsession with old technology. Felix had no idea why he was drawn to these ancient machines, but they felt right. Simple. Powerful. There was something intoxicating about the idea that humans once wielded such blunt force. And in a universe full of advanced alien weapons, it was about time someone reminded the galaxy that Earth's might wasn't just in technology. It was in the raw, unrefined destruction of things. He mumbled to himself. They won't know what hit them. Faraday was preparing for a mission of absolute absurdity, but in his mind, it was the most sensible thing in the universe. The Galactic Empire had just announced its plans to invade the neutral space station of Icarus 9. The station was known for being a neutral hub for trading and diplomacy, where beings of all species could come and go without fear of military intervention. The Empire, of course, wasn't interested in neutrality. They wanted to show their superiority to the galaxy. The station was the perfect target to prove their dominance. The trouble was, the Empire had become far too smug for Felix's liking. They laughed at humanity's outdated ways, at Earth's military history. Felix had seen a public broadcast where the Empire's commander mocked the planet's artillery, calling it utterly obsolete and completely laughable. Felix, who had spent his life tinkering with old Earth tech, wasn't about to let that insult slide. So, he hatched a plan to show them just how wrong they were. It started when he learned that the Icarus 9 Museum, home to one of the last remaining human artillery pieces from the 20th century, was about to be shut down. The artifact would be relocated to a high-security vault, an impenetrable location, ironically, for a piece of junk, as the Empire had called it. The howitzer, nicknamed the Big Bang, was to be kept under lock and key, forgotten by history and underappreciated by those who should have respected it. Felix, with his unhinged genius, couldn't allow this. Not on his watch. And so, he began to assemble a team, a ragtag group of misfits who, for one reason or another, found themselves enlisted in his ridiculous mission. The first recruit was a former soldier named Marcus, who had been dishonorably discharged for an incident involving a dancing competition, a stripper pole, and a misunderstanding about what constituted non-lethal force. He was a big guy, all muscles and bad decisions, but Felix saw something in him, someone who could pull a trigger and, more importantly, someone who could carry heavy things. Next there was Rilsa, an alien diplomat who'd been kicked out of the Galactic Council for being too friendly with humans. Rilsa's behavior was unique. He had a habit of misinterpreting Earth customs and, consequently, flirting with anyone who remotely looked like they might enjoy it. It wasn't the best combination for an international representative, but Felix thought it might come in handy when they needed to smooth-talk their way past any museum security. And finally, there was Dr. Abigail Lang, a scientist who'd been working on top-secret research that, for all intents and purposes, was a disaster waiting to happen. She had a deep understanding of Earth's old military tech, but even she hadn't realized how incredibly volatile these old weapons were. In any other situation, she would have had a career in academic research, but right now, she was the kind of person who read military manuals for fun and was one bad decision away from turning a museum heist into a galactic incident. Felix had a plan, of course, one that involved zero subtlety and a lot of improvisation. The mission was clear: break into the Icarus 9 Museum, steal the howitzer, and use it to blow the Empire's fleet into the next dimension. It was a laughable plan at best. At worst, they'd end up with a bunch of angry aliens and a weapon that would accidentally turn a nearby moon into space debris. Felix didn't see it that way, though. In his mind, they were the underdogs, and nothing was more dangerous than a cornered underdog with access to a weapon of mass destruction. As they gathered for their Briefing. It quickly became apparent that this mission wasn't going to be straightforward. Felix stood in front of a dry erase board filled with incomprehensible diagrams and a series of poorly drawn stick figures. He began enthusiastically explaining his plan, each step, each twist, and each potential disaster. Marcus looked at the board, then back at Felix, his brow furrowing. Wait, so you want us to break into a museum that's guarded by an entire fleet of Empire soldiers, steal an artillery cannon, and what? Fire it at their ships? Felix nodded, grinning like a mad scientist. Exactly. Rilsa clapped his hands together with unrestrained excitement. Oh, this is going to be so much fun. But, do you think they'll be okay with us using their weapons? You know, for, how do you say it, personal use. I'm sure they'll understand, Felix said, winking at him. We're just demonstrating the superiority of Earth's technology. Abigail, who had been silently reviewing the plan, raised an eyebrow. You do realize that the Howitzer is classified as a historical artifact, right? It's not just a weapon. It's literally a piece of history. You can't just... Of course I can, Felix interrupted, waving his hand dismissively. It's all part of the charm. You'll see. Once we get in there, I'll just ask nicely. Worst case scenario, we blow up half the station. Not that big of a deal. Abigail stared at him, eyes wide. You really don't see how bad this is, do you? Felix shrugged, his face breaking into an all-knowing grin. Relax. It's going to be great. Just trust me. And trust him they did, or at least they had no other choice. Marcus was in it for the thrill, Rilsa for the excitement of flirting with danger, and Abigail, well, Abigail didn't have much of a choice. She was already deep into this mess, whether she liked it or not. Felix's plan was, as expected, riddled with flaws and reckless abandon. But one thing was for sure, it was never going to be boring. If the Empire thought Earth's old artillery was just a joke, they were about to find out how wrong they were. And if the team didn't kill each other first, they might just pull it off. As they boarded the shuttle, Felix looked around at his motley crew. Remember, no one is getting left behind. We're in this together, for the glory of Earth. And maybe, just maybe, for the glory of whatever kind of mess they were about to get into. The shuttle doors closed with a hiss. The mission was underway. The shuttle lurched into hyperspace, and for the next few hours, Felix's motley crew was subjected to the torturous hum of the ship's engines and the faint, increasingly irritating sound of Rilsa humming some weirdly inappropriate alien love song. Marcus was sprawled out in the corner, attempting to stretch his massive frame to the point of injury. Abigail had buried herself in a pile of data pads, reviewing every bit of information about Icarus 9 and the museum, which was basically a glorified storage facility with a few cool ancient Earth artifacts. Felix himself was bouncing around, tweaking random things on the shuttle's controls that didn't need tweaking, and occasionally muttering to himself. All right, Felix said, looking up from a piece of circuitry he had just short-circuited. We've got a few hours left, so let's go over the plan. Again. Why do you keep doing that? Abigail shot him a look. You've gone over this 100 times. It's never going to work. Felix just smiled at her. It will work. The universe just needs to understand the brilliance of Earth's older tech. Marcus snorted. If by brilliance you mean blind luck, then sure. Rilsa, who had somehow ended up sitting next to Marcus, was distracted by a shiny object he'd found in the corner of the shuttle. I like it. I'm so glad we're doing this together. There's nothing quite like adventure and stealing things. He giggled, which only made the situation feel more awkward. I do wonder if I can score some souvenirs from the museum. Maybe a few antique human knickknacks? Yeah, sure, Rilsa. Marcus deadpanned, rolling his eyes. We're breaking and entering, and you're thinking about souvenirs. Just don't get caught with your pants down, okay? Abigail sighed. Is anyone even paying attention to how bad this plan is? We're breaking into a museum guarded by Imperial soldiers, and we're supposed to just walk in, steal the most dangerous piece of old artillery we can find, and then casually use it on an entire alien armada. Felix crossed his arms, completely unfazed. You think too much, Abigail. I told you, I have it all under control. Once we get there, I'll do the talking. They won't suspect a thing. And if we do get caught, well, that's what Marcus is for. Right, Marcus said sarcastically. Because I'm definitely the best at talking. You just need to look intimidating, Felix said. It's a very specific skill, and I trust you with it. Now we'll need to get into the museum, disable the security systems, without causing too much of a ruckus, and locate the howitzer. The rest is simple. Trust me. When the time comes, we'll be ready. Abigail didn't seem convinced, but there was little else she could do. She turned back to her data pads, but even she couldn't help but feel a little intrigued. Maybe it would work. Or maybe, as she'd secretly feared, they were all going to die a horrible, comedic death. Either way, she couldn't help but laugh at the absurdity of it all. As they approached Icarus 9, the crew fell into a tense silence. The massive space station loomed ahead, a metallic behemoth floating in the void. It was a neutral hub, but Felix had done his homework. He knew every inch of the station's layout, every security protocol. Well, most of it, at least. The museum was located in a high-security wing on the lower levels, but Felix had a plan to bypass the majority of the security. Rilsa adjusted his appearance for the 100th time, smoothing down his hairless head and tugging at his robes. Are we sure the humans will be okay with my alien charm? He asked, looking over at Felix. Don't worry about it, Felix said. Just smile, wave, and if anyone asks questions, tell them you're here for cultural exchange. Rilsa beamed. Cultural exchange. I like it. I'll make them love me. They'll never see us coming. Yeah, you might want to tone down the whole love me part, Marcus added. We're here to steal a cannon, not make friends. Felix grinned. Just let him do his thing. We need distractions, and Rilsa's, well, let's say he's a natural at that. As they made their way toward the museum's entrance, the crew's nerves were palpable. They weren't exactly a highly trained heist crew, but they didn't have to be. Felix had planned for every possible contingency, except for the possibility that they'd all get arrested for one reason or another, which he simply chose to ignore. Besides, he was confident that they could talk their way out of any situation. If not, well, Marcus could probably knock out a few people with his bare hands. They reached the security checkpoint, and Felix immediately took the lead. He flashed his ID card, which, surprisingly, had somehow managed to get them access to restricted areas. He was wearing an outfit that looked suspiciously like a museum worker's uniform, something he had pieced together from a variety of mismatched clothes and a dash of confidence. Rilsa, naturally, followed his lead and flashed a grin that was about as subtle as a supernova. The guard, a bored-looking alien, glanced up, then back at the terminal. What's your business here? The guard asked, eyeing them with mild suspicion. Felix smiled broadly. We're here for the cultural exchange program. You know, humans bringing their glorious history to the museum. It's a big deal. You've heard of us, right? The guard raised an eyebrow. Not really. Well, you should, Felix said, winking. We're a very impressive species. Very impressive indeed. Right, the guard said, still skeptical. And you're here to what? Take some old pieces of human history? Felix nodded enthusiastically. Exactly. And the best part is, we brought our own, specialized equipment for the occasion. We've got a very, very unique piece to share. Rilsa was practically bouncing on his toes. Yes, yes. I've heard such things about Earth's artillery. So powerful. So big. The guard glanced over at the group again. I don't know. You're looking a little too happy about this. Felix gave him a toothy grin. Would you prefer we were upset? We could always pretend to be disappointed, but trust me, it wouldn't be as much fun. The guard hesitated, then finally waved them through with a grunt. Fine, whatever. Just don't blow anything up. Felix and his team barely suppressed their laughter. As they passed through the checkpoint, They shared a collective look of victory. This was going far better than expected. But the real challenge still awaited them. Inside the museum, the atmosphere changed. The hallways were lined with Earth's historical relics, each one more stunning than the last. There were old vehicles, weapons, and even personal items from some of Earth's most famous figures. Yet Felix's eyes were fixed on the prize, the Howitzer, locked away in a secure vault at the far end of the museum. It was their key to the entire mission, no, to proving that Earth's glory wasn't some ancient relic. It was a force to be reckoned with. "All right," Felix whispered. "This is it. The last part of the plan." He turned to face his crew, all of them wearing expressions that blended excitement with a healthy dose of anxiety. But it was too late for second thoughts now. The group moved swiftly through the museum corridors, sticking close to the walls and avoiding any unnecessary attention. The sleek, sterile design of the museum's interior gave the entire space an eerie, almost alien feel, like they were intruding on something sacred. The irony wasn't lost on Felix, whose enthusiasm grew with every step they took toward the vault. Rilsa, still bouncing with nervous energy, kept looking around like a kid in a candy store. "Look at all this! I mean, I get that it's just ancient Earth stuff, but there's something amazing about it. I bet if we just took a few of these, we'd be the talk of the galaxy." Felix shushed him quickly. "Focus, Rilsa. We're not here to make a collection. We're here to steal a howitzer. You know, for someone who's supposed to be a master thief, you're a buzzkill." Rilsa shot back, but his voice was hushed. "Shut up," Felix muttered, eyes scanning the hallway. His hands were already fumbling with the security panel next to the vault door. He had a theory about how to disable the cameras in the immediate vicinity, but the timing had to be perfect. A slip-up now would turn their entire heist into a disaster. Abigail looked at the readout of the vault's security system, her brow furrowed. "This is too easy," she whispered. "They've really dumbed down the security for this place. Either we're incredibly lucky or someone's made a major mistake." Felix grinned, pulling out a small, handheld device from his pocket and plugging it into the terminal. "It's not luck, Abigail. It's preparation. And it's a little bit of charm. I'll admit, I've always had a way with machines. Except when you short-circuit them," Marcus pointed out, his voice flat. Felix waved a dismissive hand, not even bothering to glance at Marcus. "I prefer to call it creative modification. There's a difference." Rilsa, ever the optimist, added, "Maybe the howitzer is a trap. Wouldn't that be a fun twist? Like, when we open the vault, it just goes boom and the whole place gets sucked into a black hole." Felix, barely suppressing a laugh, shook his head. "Rilsa, if that happens, we'll probably have bigger problems than you thinking you're a prophet. Now, quiet. We're almost there." The moment was tense, the silence broken only by the soft beeping of the device as it worked its magic. Felix had just enough time to glance at the rest of the crew before the vault door slid open with a satisfying whoosh. The chamber beyond was dimly lit, the air thick with dust and the smell of old machinery. There, standing in the center of the room, was the prize, a hulking, antique Earth howitzer. It looked like a massive piece of artillery, just like the ones Felix had read about in history books, big, crude, and ancient, but there was no mistaking its destructive potential. He couldn't help but admire it for a moment. "Gentlemen and Rilsa," Felix said, voice dripping with sarcasm, "this is our ticket to victory. I'm telling you, this thing could blow an entire armada to pieces." Abigail eyed the massive cannon with something resembling skepticism. "You know, I'm starting to think we might actually be getting in over our heads. This is big. Really big." Marcus, however, was already rubbing his hands together. "I don't care how big it is. I just want to blow something up." Felix snapped his fingers. "And that's why we keep you around, Marcus. No one does blowing stuff up like you." Rilsa was practically drooling. "It's a giant gun. I love it. But how do we even move it? This thing is massive." Felix didn't hesitate. He knew the answer. "We don't move it. We fire it right here. The Armada's not too far off, And when we fire this thing, it's going to rattle their entire fleet. There's nothing in this galaxy that can withstand the power of ancient human artillery. This baby's going to make those fancy, high-tech alien weapons look like toys. Abigail's eyes narrowed. I still don't think we're thinking this through. We're talking about firing an ancient artillery piece at a fleet of, what, hundreds of ships. There's no way the station is going to survive that. Felix threw her a grin. That's why we're not going to do it on the station. We're going to aim at the fleet from here. The museum's pretty well guarded, but it's got great views of space, and well, our ship's already rigged with the proper trajectory for the shot. Marcus clapped Felix on the back, hard enough to make him stumble. Now that's the kind of plan I can get behind. Let's do it. With the plan set, the crew sprang into action, setting up the massive howitzer. Felix had worked out all the details. The shuttle they'd hijacked had a built-in systems override that could lock into the museum's communication grid. They didn't need much more than that to broadcast the targeting data directly to the howitzer. They'd rigged the ship to work as an impromptu fire control system, allowing them to target the Armada from within the museum itself. As they began setting everything in motion, Felix couldn't help but feel a giddy sense of anticipation. Sure, the plan was insane. Sure, they might blow up a few innocent bystanders in the process. But who cared? They were going to fire a howitzer at an alien fleet, and that was going to be glorious. Rilsa, bouncing up and down, couldn't contain himself. This is it! This is going to be the most fun thing I've ever done! I mean, stealing an ancient human weapon and using it to destroy aliens? Is this a dream? Abigail rolled her eyes. I'm not sure this qualifies as fun. But hey, as long as we survive it, I guess I'll call it entertaining. Marcus, always the pragmatist, was checking the shuttle's power readings, making sure everything was set. Yeah, you might want to start thinking about the next phase of this. Like, how the hell we get out of here after the explosion. Leave that to me, Felix replied confidently, as if everything had already been calculated. Once we fire this baby, we won't even need to run. The aliens will be so busy scrambling to figure out what the hell just happened that they'll never see us slip away. Abigail said. And when they do realize, we'll be the first ones they come after. Exactly, Felix said. But that's a problem for later. Right now, we need to focus on the task at hand. The tension in the room was palpable. Felix's team had become something of a well-oiled machine, working together with a bizarre sense of unity and purpose. They had no idea what was coming next, but that was part of the thrill. As Felix positioned himself behind the firing controls and his crew readied the systems, he couldn't help but grin. This was their moment. They had no business being here, no reason to succeed, but it didn't matter. They were going to make history, and they were going to do it with an ancient human weapon. And the aliens would never see it coming. The howitzer stood gleaming, its massive barrel aimed directly at the vacuum of space. The crew was in position, tension hanging heavy in the air, but Felix, with an unsettling calmness, adjusted the targeting systems. He couldn't help but feel a surge of pride. This was their moment, the culmination of ridiculous luck, bizarre ingenuity, and a touch of sheer insanity. Abigail glanced over his shoulder, eyeing the status screens. Everything's lined up. You're sure this is going to work? We're not firing a giant cannon just to take out a few space debris, right? Felix nodded, his fingers dancing over the console. Oh, it'll work. This thing isn't just any old antique. Earth tech wasn't as fancy as some of this galaxy's gizmos, but damn, it could deliver a punch. When I say it'll shatter their fleet, I mean it. Rilsa, practically vibrating with excitement, clapped Felix on the back. Oh, this is going to be awesome. I can't wait to see those alien faces when we fire this thing. Are we, sure it won't blow up us, though? Felix shot him a look, half amused, half annoyed. Focus, Rilsa. If we don't blow it up now, we'll be blown up later. Trust me, this is the best shot we've got. Now start helping. Meanwhile, Marcus, ever the pessimist, checked and double-checked the shuttle's systems. It's not the howitzer I'm worried about, Felix. It's the getting away part that I don't like. You really think we're going to be able to pull this off without getting ourselves killed? Felix gave him a sidelong glance, eyes twinkling with mischief. That's the spirit, Marcus. Look, I get it. This is insane. But we've come this far, and the only thing left is the fire. So let's make it count. With that, Felix's hands flew over the console as the howitzer systems whirred to life. He'd rigged it all, targeting, safety overrides, and even an emergency escape route that involved a quick getaway on the shuttle they'd borrowed earlier. Everything was ready. Everything but the aliens, who were still unaware of what was about to hit them. Let's do this, Felix muttered under his breath. There was a brief moment of calm before the storm. Rilsa leaned forward eagerly, his eyes practically glowing with excitement. Ready when you are, Felix! Felix's fingers hovered over the button that would send the blast of energy into the fleet, ready to send chaos and destruction to every alien ship in sight. Here we go, he said, as he punched in the final coordinates. The weapons systems adjusted automatically, and with a sound that could only be described as a rumble, the cannon fired. The shot rang out across space with a deafening roar, far more powerful than anything any of them had anticipated. The blast struck the first ship in the alien Armada like a bolt of lightning, splintering the hull and causing a massive explosion. The shockwave rippled outward, devastating the surrounding ships with an impossible force. It wasn't just a successful shot. It was an annihilation. Felix couldn't help but laugh, a triumphant, almost insane cackle, as he watched the fireworks unfold on the screen. Did you see that? The first hit obliterated them. No shields, no fancy alien tech. Just raw, human firepower. Abigail stood silent for a moment, her expression a mix of disbelief and awe. I didn't think it would actually work. Marcus slapped Felix on the back with a grin. You're a crazy son of a bitch. But I've gotta say, that was beautiful. A work of art. Rilsa was bouncing around, practically bursting with joy. This is the best day of my life. I've never seen anything blow up like that. I need to take a picture of this. Felix, still basking in the glory of the moment, looked at his crew. They were all still alive, still here, and somehow, against all odds, they had just delivered one hell of a punch to the aliens. But the battle wasn't over. They had taken out the first wave, but the rest of the fleet was still coming. The howitzer, though impressive, wasn't exactly a precision weapon, and the aliens weren't going to sit back and let themselves be destroyed. They'd retaliate. All right, listen up, Felix said, his voice hardening. That was just the opening salvo. We've got more ships coming in. We need to fire again, now star. Abigail, Rilsa, get ready to reload. Marcus, keep an eye on our rear. They'll be coming in fast. Abigail nodded, already moving to the controls that would reload the howitzer. This is insane. You're telling me we're going to take out all of them? Felix didn't look away from the screens. I'm telling you, we don't have a choice. We keep firing, or they keep coming. And if they keep coming, we're all dead. This is the only shot we've got. Marcus was already looking over their escape route. All right, so we're not just going to keep firing. We need a backup plan. This shuttle's good, but it's not invincible. If we get caught in the blast radius, we're toast. Felix considered that for a moment, then grinned. I didn't say it'd be easy. But right now, the only thing between us and a whole bunch of dead aliens is a giant cannon and our wits. Let's make sure we don't screw this up. As the second blast from the howitzer sent another alien ship into oblivion, the crew barely had time to celebrate before the remaining ships in the fleet began retaliating. Energy blasts shot past them, narrowly missing the shuttle as it darted to avoid fire. The howitzer was still operational, but the alien forces were beginning to realize the threat they were facing. Rilsa let out a shout of excitement, his voice betraying the ridiculous joy he felt at being part of the chaos. They're retreating. We've got them on the run. Felix nodded grimly. It's not over yet. We've got one shot left. With no time to waste, they all gathered their wits, bracing for the final attack. The alien fleet was regrouping, But they wouldn't have time to fire before the next shot from the howitzer slammed into the heart of the Armada. The crew had come this far, and now, it was all about timing. Felix, grinning despite the intensity of the moment, punched the fire control. Last one. Let's finish this. The final blast tore through the remaining ships, shattering their defenses and leaving nothing but debris in the wake of the human artillery. The alien fleet was shattered. There was nothing left. The crew could barely process what they had done, their adrenaline still running high. Felix let out a whoop of joy. That's it. We did it. I told you, didn't I? That's the power of old-school Earth artillery. Rilsa threw his arms in the air, whooping in celebration. Best day ever. Marcus grinned. Well, we may have just turned a museum artifact into a weapon of mass destruction, but at least we'll get the hell out of here alive. Mission accomplished, right? Felix just laughed. Mission and history made.